Are we all set with technology?
This room is.
Still live in the room? Are we ready to begin?
Before you do that,
Yes.
before you call it to order, there are cupcakes back here.
Bring in those. Yeah, that's a really nice touch. Thank you. All right, let's begin. Task force meeting number 14, our final meeting today. It's a bit of a shorter agenda. Let's go through it. But before we do that, we'll do welcome and introductions. Maybe we'll start in the back of the room. Introduction.
Everyone, I'm Kara Van Libergy with Stan Associates.
And I'm Megan Ryan with Stan Associates as well.
All right.
I'm Corinne Struggle with MPCA.
More PCA folks. I guess is.
Hi, Stephen Mickelson, Clothesline Program at EPCA.
Steve Tyson with the closed landfill unit as a project manager.
John Mueller, also part of the closed landfill program, one of the engineers for the site.
For Ponce Navy, I manage the closed landfills program here at MPCA. Let's move on to task force introductions.
Pam Anderson, Remediation Division Director with the PCA. Kirk is unable to be with us today. So
Stephanie Suter with Washington County. Caleb Johnson was the primary member of this group, but he has recently left the county. So I was here for meeting number 1 and now I'm here for meeting number 14.
Serendipitous.
Dan Scotland, I'm the hydrologist with the Minnesota DNR.
David Bell with Minnesota Department of Health in our environmental surveillance and assessment section.
Good morning, everybody. Nathan Wallerstedt. I'm a project manager and branch chief with the St. Paul District Army Corps of Engineers.
Victoria Reinhardt, and I'm here representing Ramsey County.
Dave Magnuson, Dakota County Waste Regulation Supervisor.
Bill Sumner, one of the river cities, Newport.
Happy New Year, everybody. Judy Francis, Center of the Universe, South St. Paul.
Melanie McMahon, also Center of the University of St. Paul, Interim Director of Planning and Economic Development.
I'm Sam Paskey, Assistant General Manager at the Met Council.
Just to round out the introductions, any members of the public here like to introduce yourself?
Kiki Sonnen, St. Paul Bird Alliance.
I'm Diamond.
Kate from Kate Foundation.
Michael Reed with Ramsey County.
Kathy Seidel, Pigside Park Friends.
Joey Maloney, Clean Harbors.
And Diane Ruddle, Clean Harbors.
All right, let's keep going. This is our plan for today. I will summarize the task force comments we got. We're in our second round of comments. Go through the comments that came in, not all of them, but just the ones that we think are significant and worth talking about. There'll be a chance for discussion of comments, followed by presentation of really what is the next step after the work of the task force, which is feasibility study. So I'll be turning it over to our engineering team at that point to talk about the process they're in now, which is scoping out what the feasibility study will be. There'll be an opportunity for public comment, and we'll round out today with a chance for, I'll say a few words about more next steps. That's for final reflection, and then we're going to have time to get it there. Right. So overview of the comments, 2 groupings of comments. Comments from Prairie Island Indian community. We want to go over those with you. We made a few adjustments to the report based on those comments, and also some comments that we got from you all. Those are the 2 things we want to talk about today in terms of comment. Next slide. From the Prairie Island Indian community, really we heard 2 sort of things. One was some shifts that speak to impact on the Mississippi River and downstream communities. You'll see one of the task force recommendations was adjusted slightly to account for that feedback. And also language, they were requesting more specific language about the contaminant consequences. And I think that was a really good comment. We were able to make those changes. So the 2 main shifts you'll see in the report. So what those look like in detail, this is the first one in the recommendations section, really adding what is a shift here to highlight downstream communities and ecosystems. You see the edits that we made here. These are also edits that were in the report that we sent all to you last Friday. So Maybe I'll just go through them quick. We can talk about them at the end, or if you want to go through them individually. Let me know if you have immediate comments. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Second, I'm going to say comment of significance. The comment was words that detected values are multiple times above the standard does not do it justice when we're talking about tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of times above the standard. I think that's a good comment, and that's definitely true. So we made those shifts, talking about more quantifying more detail. When we say PFAS exceeded the standard, this is the arena we're talking about. It's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands times above the guidance values. So we're more specific there. See those changes reflected in the tables for the primary contaminants. Okay, I'll keep going here. Also, a Prairie Island Indian community comment, really just more clearly stating that Pig's Eye Lake, it is connected to the Mississippi River. So there's a couple places we added language just to more clearly and explicitly state that Pig's Eye Lake also drains to the Mississippi River. Reflection of a concern from a downstream community. Maybe I'll stop there. Anything to talk about with that set of comments? Questions, concerns, anything to go over?
Have the comments been mainly restricted to Minnesota? Do we take any comments from further down the river?
We did not.
Okay.
The reason we did the Prairie Island conversations with the tribe was at the request of the task force asking if we've engaged with tribal members. And we were able to have a number of conversations with the Prairie Island Indian community, both their environmental staff and the larger folks from the tribal council, to really talk them through what we've been doing here as the task force and the directions we're heading, and share with them the data behind it. And so we gave them the opportunity to review the report. Didn't commit that we could make all of the edits, but that we wanted to get their feedback to incorporate into the document.
Very glad that we were able to do that.
Let's keep going. Just some comments from the task force. We want to highlight the addition of a sentence here talking about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Program projects. That in the edits that we sent you. This was in the draft. It looks like a whole bunch of changes were made, which is, I guess, the redlining and then a creation of a whole new section. What that actually is just moving existing text. So this section was moved. Yeah. Actually, no, this is the addition. Yeah, so this is the addition of a sentence. And this one, the next one is the moving. No, this is it. Move the paragraphs, both. Move the paragraph. Summary of local land use to the, yeah. And then also the addition of the sentence. Both are part of this edit. Fish consumption advisory. Addition of this sentence to be a little more specific about fish consumption. To the end. And this change here is really just updating the number we were using for the capacity of the metro plant was 251. That's sort of like we're learning it's a worst case maximum capacity. A more realistic capacity is 181. It's just changing the number to be more accurate. I think that may bring us to the end. Right, so feels like we're at a final report. Things to talk about, these final changes, anything else you saw in the report we should go over, any general questions, concerns, feedback for us as we move from move closer to a draft we would turn in. And moving closer, really, we take this final draft and run it through our publication support team formatting, internal agency review, and that would be submitted for PS.
Well, first of all, think about the first time we met and thinking about all of the things that had to be discussed. I think this task force and PCA, all those involved have just done a fabulous job of trying to get through all of that. It seemed like an impossible task to begin with. So I'm very impressed, and I appreciate the outreach to the tribal communities as well. I think that I'm very pleased with what we're going to be presenting to the legislature. And I guess my question is this, does this task force vote on that? Because if they do, I'd like to make the motion to approve.
Or that I did want to go back to one of the,
Okay, yes.
sorry. The Merca one, that's the thing is one right, yeah, no,
Before?
yeah, right here. I just, for accuracies, I don't believe there's actually a Merca chapter in the city's comprehensive plan. The Merca law is going to be in our zoning code, right? So-
There is a chapter.
There's a Merca chapter in the
There's a
comp plan.
chapter, and it's, yeah,
So I think this might cause a little bit of confusion with how it is, just
Sure.
between like, right, comp plan, zoning code, what's actually in code, comp plan, and the sort of what's the weight and authority of that, et cetera. And just to not like conflate all of it, and it's a little like calling out part of the zoning code or part of the comp plan and not others. So I don't know if it, future use of the site should be consistent with the St. Paul's comp plan,
Strike the,
right? The Merca chapter.
Okay.
It's consistent with City of St. Paul's 2040 comprehensive plan and subsequent plans. And the subsequent plans includes, right, river plans, it includes parks, like it includes sort of the comp plan and other city plans. It feels more comprehensive actually to strike Merca out and just leave it with the comp plan. Does that make sense? Yeah, thanks.
We'll make the change. Good.
I know that's really nitpicky, but as I was thinking about it after, I'm like, well, thanks.
Is there more to talk about?
I renew my motion.
Nothing I do very much, Lee. So you have a motion to approve the task force vote. Second, is there second?
I'll second it.
All in favor to approve the report with this last edit? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the report is approved. Great. Let's keep going on the agenda. We did this, additional questions, changes. We are at the public comment period. So before we go into this, let's do a check. Do we have anybody online this morning?
We have several people online.
So we'll open it up for public comment first in the room, and then for those online. For public comment, we'd ask that you start by sharing your name and your interest in the project. Any public comment from folks in the room today?
Yeah, the plan that I could download from the committee's website it seemed like it was the same one as before the last meeting, so I don't know what you guys have been reading. So, but just walking in just this morning, yeah, you can download the pollution data from the site, and I did that and make my own graphs. And so I just looked up when I reposted, and I found 10 million times the PFAS level. And I think you should make clear how many times it is more, whether it's the river water standard, which is lower than the drinking water standard. I'm just guessing. I always, when I put down Pigside Park Friends, I say, I could be wrong, but that could be going on. And it's super relevant because Hastings was in the paper 2 days ago because they're one of a couple of local communities that has to spend a huge amount of money and charge people more on their water bill so they can filter these long living numbers to get them down where it's safe to drink. So check that out. It could be 60 times 100,000. You said 100,000, but that's what I see. But check me out on that.
Well, I had our technical team do a review of what we have in the current version, but I'll have them look at it again.
With the 2 different levels of drinking. So then people know whether it's above for swimming or if it's above for drinking. And, from what I saw, it's above for both.
Some of the complexity is there's multiple PFAS and
we can quantify that.
Yeah, right. right, because I saw it a lot higher. It's already high. So, but it's, so many people live along the river. My sister lives in the Quad Cities. They have to filter for PFAS. I mean, all these communities have to do that. Now, it's hugely expensive and, 3M's not paying for it.
All of our technical team look at it again. Any other public comment in the room this morning?
If I heard correctly, the motion before was to remove the critical area, following the critical area. I would argue against that. The critical area is state law and applies to this area. And it should be noted that you should follow the critical area. You also should have in there that also to be consistent with the goals of the MNRA, the federal legislation and rules, and stuff that have been put in place. Those are all laws that have been approved publicly by higher level of government. I would also like to talk about I think there's a misstatement in the on page 6 where it talks about an environmental wood supply and the wood chipping operation, and it says currently there is no data that shows the Big Eye dump waste footprint extends beneath the environmental wood supply. That's factually incorrect. There in earlier operations, there were fires there and fires underground in that trash and stuff was dumped there and documented. But even more documented is I could take you for a walk out there. There's been a tree or two large ones that have been blowing down in storms. And on the bottom, you see the bottom of the root ball and it's fresh. I mean, from the dump. And they're on the west side of this, not so it includes it all. Also, the maps, the topographical maps of this site are the land here originally and before they did the dump filling is the same across that area. So there's clearly, and there's also pictures that show fill areas there. So there's plenty of documentation that that is a dump site, and I believe that should be recorded in the because that's a factual case here.
It's an important open question where the boundary of the dump is in that area. I think a data set we're looking for is that we've actually done borings, so we know the type of the waste, the thickness of the waste. I think there's some anecdotal evidence you have, which is important and it's good to know, but this is an area that I think is, at the last meeting, Kirk was saying this is an area that the feasibility study would focus on. It is, like, as you noted, an important open question. What are the boundaries of the waste area in that location?
As I've mentioned before, the Met Council prohibits having a site like this in the park. This is parkland, dedicated parkland. The Ramsey County prohibits, has a no net loss parkland. You can't remove parkland without replacing it. And there's nothing in here about, oh, whoa, we're going to replace that parkland. City of St. Paul has a no net loss parkland provision that is required to do such as the same thing. And there's no provision in here to do that. Our lease that's on there, the lease, city's requirements for leasing property in the park require that you have outside appraisals of what the lease should be. So it's market rate lease, and that money has to go into a pot for parkland use in that area. There is no such a thing existing today. As a matter of fact, they pay virtually nothing there. Also, they are required, because this is a floodplain, you would have to remove all that material when there's floods. They have not been doing that in violation of state law. The city lease that they're under requires them to have an 8-foot tall berm all around the site as an alternative to moving it. There is no 8-foot berm. They just ignore it. So this site has been used illegally in violation of state regulations, violation of city code, and in anyways, and in violation of the Metro Parks programs. I really would hope that this group would actually look at the laws and look at what is going on in this site and would stand up for what the laws are on the books. That's, anyways, I'll stop. I think it's really important that we follow these laws and follow the protections that have been in place to protect this area. Oh, and the one other thing, and this is an important point, is this is a case, again, of discrimination. The neighborhoods around this park, this is not just the neighborhood, but those who are closest to it and have a shortage of access, it's majority minority. It's people of color who live around here. And what happens here, what's happening here, is something that happens across the area, and that is taking from low-income neighborhoods, people of color, those who have the least, and giving it to the wealthier neighborhoods and those who have the most. And if you want to be in support of that, I guess you can, but I would certainly hope that this task force does not support those kind of activities and would be willing to stand up for the rules that are in place to prevent that from happening. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Comments from other folks in the room, other public comment.
Yes, my name is Kate. I'm from Kate Foundation. I'm a human ecologist, and I'm very much interested in this kind of work, actually. And I believe strongly that you did very good work. So thank you very much. But I want to add 2 more points, which I think maybe if you do a little more, then the overall picture will be much better. Number 1 is I haven't seen any international level, because when you are from local, state, regional, then you have to go to international level. So you could compare what you have done, what happened in the other parts of the world, how they done, what kind of progress they made. So you can see your position and your work effectiveness. So that maybe that point just think of, which is similar contaminations, or more or less same. That's number 1. Number 2, I haven't seen much work on environmental education. What you're doing is to be educated, the young generation and the future generation. So you give a knowledge to that, what happened. So those, and environmental education is environmental awareness, raising their level of awareness. Number 2, educating them. So level of education. Number 3, attitude, to become positive in life and touch, take action, love it, think of it, try to, something like that. And skills. They learn skills. And so whenever they see similar actions somewhere else, they could be able to understand and say, oh, this is wrong. We can do this. And number 5, individual action or collective action. So those elements, little bit, I think is missing. So if you add, it will be more spice. Thank you.
Any other comments from folks in the room we haven't heard from yet? Follow-up comment?
I have another minute, but, so it's not clear when I read it. To Tom's point about the wood chipping area, and there's also a big pile of construction dirt that nobody wants that's sitting there. That there's public maps for pollution where you can click. And I've done it in the wood chipping area and also read the green building is built so gas comes out. And for them to just put in a post for some of their machinery, the wood chipping thing, they had to get a special permit because of the gas. So I'm confused when I have read that that's not part of where the dump was. Also, it's not clear that the North Pig's Eye area where the homeless camp now is. And I used to hike there and I saw when you injected the dye to see where it went, which I also didn't read the results of in the report, that caused a whole bunch of trash up in that area to come out. So I think we all know that there's also trash up there, but it wasn't clear unless I missed it in this report that trash is up there too. That people are living on in tents. So that anyways, so, and also one last thing is I was remembering Mel Chin, the artist's revival field art installation at Pig's Eye in the 1990s that you can still read about. And he was trying to do phytoremediation and some of the pennycress brought up like a little bit of poison. And but you guys are tackling 5 million cubic yards of it. So thank you, because nobody's done anything since that one little teaspoon. Except the university is also doing their experiments with phytoremediation. They were going to put bags of charcoal along the creek and try to collect some of it. And that's an active thing that's going on there. So I was disappointed in the report that the only two options are to pile it up and put a floodplain after digging it out, making it not a wetland. And then you have your gas removal and, when they're getting rid of all the water that has PFAS in it, surrounded by this flood wall that users still have to be able to use in order to have no net loss, that is still in there. But I also know about education to tell people our landfills are getting full in Minnesota, so nobody wants it or can't have it. And so I was disappointed that the 5 ways that even as an experiment, it could be supported in this document, but it wasn't to try some of the new things to sort and clean, and, burn and try to do some things to reduce the 5 million down to something else. So thanks.
Up in the back of the room, yes.
Sure. Yanni Humus with District Council 1. So thank you. I'm new to the space here. A lot of work, I can tell, went into this. And so you may have covered this, but I'm not seeing it. They're addressing fluoride and aquatic invasions, nitrate contaminations, pollinator declines. Maybe this is for later review after this report is done, but forest health and a health study for residents in the area. Overall environmental justice impact, because we are an environmentally justice impacted communities on both sides. And just from what I've heard at District Council 1 is residents would like to see the contaminants removed rather than contained.
I'll speak to a couple of things, the pollinator things. So our closed landfills program, there's a governor's executive order to increase pollinator habitat wherever we can. So there's any reseeding that goes on at the Big Side Jump through remediation, would be probably establishing pollinator habitat for sure. Some of the other details you pointed out, they're important details. Many of them will be addressed in what is the next stage, which is the feasibility study where we really get into the details. Yeah, I appreciate your comments. Move to public comment. Any public comment from folks that are online? The way you would do this is to raise your hand. There's a button that you can press in Teams to raise your hand, and then we will unmute you and you can cast your comment. Any comments from those online this morning? Sometimes it takes a minute to find the button. Press the button, so we'll give a little extra time here, especially since this is the last meeting, really the last opportunity. So close our public comment for the for the task force. Any public comment online for those online?
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat, no raised hands. With that, let's keep going. Next steps, feasibility study.
Hans. As I said in introductions, I'm Stephen Mickelson, one of the supervisors in the closed landfill program. I'm out of our Brainerd Regional Office, so take a little one-day vacation at St. Paul. The meeting. I was going to introduce the next section, which is next steps, the feasibility study. It's going to be a very technical and probably long process of investigation, analysis, scoping out feasibility study. And we have a site team that's going to be doing this mass undertaking. Includes, we're going to be continuing to contract with WSP, who has been working with us all along. We'll continue to work with our MPCA site team. That includes some of the folks in the room today. Steve Tyson, you met on the helping manage the project along. John is on our engineer team. Also online, Stephanie Rhino is the lead of our engineer team. Sophia Vaughn is online. She's a hydro that'll be assisting the effort. And then at WSP, they've got a team of folks that are going to work with us, including Emma, Savannah, and Narayan, who you've seen at a lot of the meetings. Narayan will be presenting the next few slides to talk about what those next steps and scope of the feasibility study includes, keeping it real kind of general and high level with some estimated timelines with that, so it's not holding it to any specific dates. With that, Narayan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and Corinne is advancing the slides, so you can prompt her when you're ready to move on. So, Narayan, please take it.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Keep going.
Okay, good. Okay. Thanks, Mick. Just to build on this. So as we wrap up the task force, but we are working parallelly to finish up the last bit of data we need to be collecting from a delineation perspective. So one thing we need to do is finish up the deep aquifer investigation. So that should be happening in the next few months. And then we'll be collecting additional surface water samples and then doing a transducer study. So the transducer study is just to understand how the deep groundwater flow is interacting with the Mississippi River. So some of the questions that have come up previously, just, what is going offsite? Is there any impacts in the deeper groundwater that we should be concerned in addition to the waste that we've been talking all along in the task force? So just as we are going to go into the next step of what is happening at the site, I think we've talked about, the conceptual site model, how is the waste interacting with the groundwater, how is that interacting with the lake, how is it interacting with Battle Creek, and then eventually how is it, mixing with Mississippi River. So what are the relationships between each of these medias, and how is the source migrating from the waste to into each of these water bodies? And if that is, off-site migration, what is happening with the off-site migration? So I think, so the next 6 months is going to be focused on finishing up this data gap investigation and wrapping up this CSM. Next slide, please. So as part of this next, again, 6 months is we're going to be then looking as part of preparing for the feasibility study is what is the risk evaluation? And what that means is impacts to human life and the eco risk. So you're looking at both human risk and eco risk. So it means when you talk about humans, it's, access to Peakside Lake. What is the risk from, means we already have some of the fish consumption advisory. But again, with respect to, humans, don't consume the water. If you're fishing, is it just, what does that mean? If you're walking on the landfill, what does that mean? Again, so you're looking at all the possible pathways to be impacted by the contaminants at the site. So we'll be doing an evaluation for both human and eco risk. And then taking the recommendations coming out of the task force, so the two primary being dig and haul and dig and line. So we're going to build on top of, because some of the initial evaluations that were presented were more from, is it possible? What would it take to dig and haul? What would it take to build a new landfill, which is up to codes? But now we would take it a step further, start doing what does it mean with the infrastructure on site? What does it mean from site grading? What does it mean from a floodplain perspective? So we will start digging into much deeper as to an engineering perspective. What does that mean? From a land use perspective, zoning perspective, the current regulations, means do we need to get any variances based on the criteria? Means same thing going back to the FAA, what are their restrictions on the landfill height? So we've had some discussions with them already. So this would now, from an engineering perspective, is take all of that into consideration and then move it forward. And then that would then feed into the feasibility study as we wrap up the site investigation. So we're going to be doing both of these parallelly, at least for the next 6 to 8 months. And then that once we're done with the site investigation, then we would start working on the feasibility study, but then some of this would feed into that as well. And then the feasibility study could go 2 ways. One is depending on what the deep aquifer looks like. So then we would either then have to start considering if we see impacts in the deep aquifer, what does that mean? What are the remedial options for that? So then we would then maybe look into some of those options as well. But if there is no risk to the deep aquifer, then we would just do like a focused feasibility study, which is then, like we've talked about, what is the dig and haul, the dig and line, and then focus on the waste at that point. Next slide, please. So the next step is once we do the feasibility study, then we say, okay, what's the best remedial option? And then we would need to do some additional design kind of investigation. Say, for example, if you're doing a new landfill, then what are the geotech investigational studies? What is the structural condition? So, do we need, plans from a grading, hydraulic study? So you would do a lot more from a design perspective, not just what your typical environmental investigation, but from implementing the design, what would that mean? So we would land up doing over the next 8 to 9 months of design specific investigations. And then that would then continue to feed into the remedial design, which would go into your typical 30%, 60%, 90% design. And you would keep refining during each of these stages as to what are your findings, and then how do you refine it? And then that includes from a costing perspective as well, because as you do your 30, 60, 90% design, you are refining your costs to get much accurate cost representation as well. And during all of this process, you're working with MPCA, all the agencies to make sure everybody's on board with all of these design perspectives. Next slide, please. And then the last part is implementing the remedial plan. And then that would be issuing work plans, specifications, drawing, permitting, agency coordinations, working with going back to the stakeholder meetings, presenting your design, and then getting public approval on that. So this typically could take, depending on how the permits work, anything between year to year and a half. So right now we're projecting it being between October 2028 to 2029. This is just a long process. It's just because given how the profile of the site, the extent of impacts we have, and just what goes into this. So there is going to be a lot of questions, a lot of stakeholder meetings and agency coordination required. And just as what we are doing right now is also we are continuing to monitor the landfill gas and doing the regular groundwater monitoring that is required by the Superfund process that we are doing. So we still are annually sampling the groundwater and monitoring the landfill gas at the same time. So a lot of things happening concurrently, but we're trying to move this forward to the best we can and keep it going. I think that's all I had. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Narayan. Anyone have questions for Ryan or the site team?
David Bell with MDH. Can you speak just briefly to, with the groundwater, surface water sampling, what you'll be looking for? I know that can change over time, but preliminarily, if you have an idea of what you'll be looking for?
So it means again, just we are looking at the concentrations with respect to Battle Creek. We haven't collected, so I think we've been focused on interaction between Battle Creek and the surface water interaction. The next step is, as part of the CSM, is the interaction between Pig's Eye Lake. We need to determine if we need to collect additional surface water samples within Pig's Eye Lake, and then what is the interaction between concentrations and the gradient as to what is that mass going into Pig's Eye Lake at the same time. So I think we are looking for, from a mass balance perspective of, because I think we finally got the data. We didn't have data from the soil. So now we're going to be looking at mass of impacts within the soil. What does that mean from migration to groundwater? And then from a leaching perspective, and then subsequently based on your groundwater flow, the rate of groundwater flow, what does that mean from impacts to Pig's Eye Lake and Battle Creek? And then because you have some off-site impacts coming through Battle Creek too. So we, just again, from a mass balance perspective, you're looking at, okay, you have X volume of water flowing through Battle Creek, going into Pig's Eye Lake, and then you have the groundwater interaction into Pig's Eye Lake as well. So hopefully I answer your question there.
And can we get these slides after, just for the task force? Just that I liked the breakdown generally of the broad timeline. It'd be helpful.
We made it available. Anyone else? Question over here?
I'm from the public here, so I was wondering if during this process from 26 to 2027 to 2029, what is the interface going to be with the public to bring us along as to what's happening and what the findings are and why we're going this way instead of that way? How is that going to be fit in?
That last slide, I know Narayan mentioned a series of stakeholder meetings, agency coordination. Do you have any more to say on that, Narayan?
I think as the record of decision, so I think once we finish up the remedial design and as part of the agency approval, as part of the process, that's when, I think we are taking input from the task force, and then that would go into the feasibility study, into eventually, so at the end of the feasibility study, you would have additional stakeholder meetings to, say, this is what came out of the feasibility study. This is the most appropriate path forward, or, maybe because you go through as part of the feasibility study, you have a bunch of criteria that you would be evaluating. So then you go back and say, okay, based on all our further evaluations for these remedial strategies, what is, you'll have much better costing and what is the impact. So you're looking more in depth as to what each of these impacts would be or the benefits. So you're looking at both the benefits and impacts for each of these remedial options. So once we finish the FS, maybe that's another option at that point, is to say, okay, this is what came out of the feasibility study. And then once we say, okay, these are the remedial design that needs to be focused on. So is it the dig and line, the dig and haul, So then we say, okay, which is that remedial strategy that we want to move forward from a final design perspective. So I think it will be a collaboration between MPCA and the task force at that point.
The task force will still continue in existence.
No, the task force, by the legislation that formed the task force, it's ended. Just to reinforce what's been said already, we're switching from one public process, which is the task force that had this structure, frequency of meetings, to a different public process, which is the Superfund process. That's also a public process. Is a requirement for public input when we get to a place before our remedy is implemented. So it's shifting from one public process to another public process. And also, anytime someone from the public calls us and says, I have interest in this, I want to know what's going on, we're happy to talk with them. So outside of the structure of this and the structure of the Superfund process, we're always happy to talk with people who reach out to us. That's also part of what we do.
I suggest something. I'm assuming the website you have right now for the task force and the information on there will be staying for a little while. Will you be able to link from there to the new process for people that are looking to follow along as they're able to, just to make that connection if you're used to going to the current site to find out the information, just some way to help continuity?
Good suggestion. Yep. Let's get to it more near the end about next steps. I think it's a very good suggestion for a next step.
Are there any questions on the chat? I should just check quick. No. Okay. Go ahead.
Because I don't completely understand the process, but is it that you're going to collect this information broadly to better understand what's going on there, and then look at applying it to the first one and see how that goes? Is that, or are you going to be working on multiple proposals?
Right. All the information is going to be using the recommendations that the task force has worked up these last 3 years. All the future work is going to be really based off of what those recommendations are to make sure those are all, fully studied and realized as possibilities throughout the feasibility study. Is that accurate so far?
Yeah.
So, not just going to pick one or the other and go. It would be more encompassing based on what the task force has recommended. That will guide the scope and the process of the feasibility study.
How much more time, or maybe there isn't an increase in time, how much more time would it take to do that than to take the priority plan and do that? See whether, not sure why you're looking at all these alternatives at this time. Thought this process was to get us past that.
So the feasibility study process, it looks at a range of options. And often what is the case is there's one or two that are much more viable. Recommendation from the task force is to look at the dig and haul and dig and line. So when the feasibility study process is done, you'll see all of them there. But as recommended by the task force, the dig and haul and the dig line will have the majority of the airtime. That is the focus. That is the direction we got from the task force. But when a feasibility study compares a bunch of different options, you have to have something to compare them to. So that's why the other things will be there as well.
One of the concerns I have is, for funding this project, it would be good to be going to the legislature, trying to find funding. If we're still working on, multiple projects, it's a lot harder to advocate for funding for the project.
It won't be exactly like that. We're taking the recommendations from the task force and going into technical detail. There's no change in that. Other comments? Yes.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what part of the process will decide the preferred route to go with? This preferred option.
Part of the process will decide.
Yeah, about what's that timeline look like?
Ryan, did you hear the?
So I think I don't know if there is one, like, is it just the cost? So I think you're looking at cost, you're looking at benefit. What is the risk? Means what's the duration? So I think, so we compare it to, say, for example, even like a little bit on sustainability, so you strike on sustainability, okay, which is much more a sustainable option from a long-term perspective. So you're looking at short-term risk, long-term risk. So you go through this, I think it's 7 or 8 criteria that you go through for each of these options that we evaluate. And then it's more of a, what is important to the community, what is important, so I think you go through from a community engagement perspective. So I think, so it is not based on just one evaluation or a one criteria, but how, and then, then it becomes more of a PCA discussion with the agencies to make sure then what's the best path forward. So I think it's a much more holistic approach, if I had to put it that way.
Just to clarify, my question actually is, what part of the process do we ask for the preferred options? That's my only question. After we've done all the analysis, where does the preferred option get picked? At what time in the process?
You're asking how we go from 2 to 1, and what is the 1? That's what you want to know. Yep.
I just think that this feasibility study obviously is really important, but what came from us as a task force was these are the two options. Once you have the feasibility study done, I think that they would both go, ultimately, the legislature is going to decide what happens here. And I think that both of the options will go forward to them. There's going to be a difference in cost. There's going to be a difference in timeline. There's going to be a difference in a lot of different ways to this. But they will have the two options. I don't think that this would come out with necessarily one that is considered the preferred option. They would get both and make that decision, because that's what we're saying as a task force. Bring both forward. Do the feasibility study on both and bring them forward. Ultimately, it's up to the legislature to decide which one. And hopefully that's been my concern all along, is that we do all this work and then it sits there because it's happened before. And so by bringing both of them forward for the legislature to decide which one to move forward with, I believe we have a better possibility of actually getting something done this time. So I don't believe that the feasibility study is meant to bring up one over the other. It's, here they are. This is what will happen with them. This is what they will cost. This is the timeline. And then a decision is made by the legislature. Is that accurate?
I don't know that there's anything in the legislation saying they get the final decision making. I do think in a funding proposal, we would put towards the legislature, we may list both options, or if the feasibility shows that one of them is not actually feasible, then we may need to move forward with just one. But there is certainly is the capacity at the state level for us to put forward a change item into the governor's proposal to say, this is, here's your two options. They're both viable. Here's your dollar amount, or here's the one that we can actually build. So yes and no.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, the legislature set up this task force so that they could gather the information. So they are expecting that more than just a study that comes to them and says, these are the two options. At least I hope that's the case. The whole idea was make sure we know what we're doing before we say, this is what we think we should do. And this task force went through a lot to try to figure out which one and decided that there's two. And so moving forward with those. But it's, again, the legislature, I believe, I mean, this study is, or the task force recommendations are going to go to the legislature. But the important part of this is there's not a decision to be made at this point until the feasibility study is done.
Yes.
So ultimately, it will end up there. And you're right, it is about funding. Because without that, none of this matters. So.
In the last 3 years, and the final report will reflect that what the work of this group has done is consider more than just two options. There were several, and they were studied kind of all along, not a full feasibility study, but the two recommended that seemed the most feasible to recommend. Now we're going to go and see how feasible those preferred recommendations are. And like Pam said, that's not going to choose one or the other. It's going to show how feasible they are to then present to the next step. Here's the preferred from the task force. Here's the feasibility of each. Now we see what can be done. Pulling it down over a long stretch of years.
The real sticking point here, I think, is that you have one proposal that fits with state policy as far as protection of the environment and as far as natural resources in this area, which is designated parkland, has the highest zoning as far as the National Park Service. It's the and the other one is in violation of state laws and the critical area plan and the National Park Service. Once you go in there, and you remove that pollution out of that site, you can't put it back in that site. You can't fill wetlands. Law. And nobody has ever recommended having a dump on that site, you know. If you could clean up this site, would you, you know, but would be recommended to put the dump up above the grade, up above the floodplain. Nobody has ever considered that. And I could tell you at decades and decades and decades of work on this since the start of the critical area, start of the other programs. People would be out there in the streets if you proposed dumping the hazardous waste back in the park, even if it's up in there, and even more so if it's up there. So I don't know what the deal is about going down that foolish path that's going to blow up in your face if it ever was actually put in front of the public as the alternative. I mean, nobody wants it. And so you've got one plan that works. You put your resources and planning, the money and time on that, we can move that along faster, hopefully. But to start on with the other one still out there, Then you try and talk to legislators about what's your plan? Oh, we don't know, we're still working. Oh,
That is the next step, additional evaluation. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna move forward with is the additional evaluation.
Yeah, you had your hand up before.
It would be good to have had this work done for this committee, because the more data you have, the better. It wasn't, and maybe $800,000 for 3 years wasn't long enough or enough money, but here we are. So I think this is good. I think this includes aquifer checks, right? And I just saw the map at the Bell Museum and it shows the river and all the 3 different aquifers not that far away. And I know they're complicated and we're never going to get it right. Probably we use those for our real drinking water. So it would be nice to, now that it's here, just like with this $800,000, you guys had a great timeline with a budget. And this is sort of a wishy timeline. We're unclear where the money comes from. I'm thinking it's from that little fee everybody pays to have their trash picked up. Because this is a state Superfund site. And so all the other Superfund sites have gotten some of our money. So why not this one? And that's what you guys are, the money you guys are going to work with. It'd be nice to have that. It just like, that 2 or 3 page thing for this committee for this next step. So we can refer to that and other people can be clear on it.
The money comes from Milcat.
LCAT.
Yeah, I can talk to you more about it.
Well, no, I just want everybody else to know.
There's funding for the feasibility study is the short version of it.
And what is LCAT stand for?
Milcat,
LCAT.
Metropolitan Landfill Contingency Action Trust Fund.
See, that's all new to, if it's new to me, it's probably new to like all the public, so.
Yes,
Question about the
yeah,
feasibility process?
yeah. I mean, in generally, before you take a decision, normally we have water quality standards, like especially drinking water. When E. coli, every 100 ml, it is too not drinkable. So we have to have first water quality standard. Secondly, wastewater quality. When we are going to discharge, then we have to have a quality. So once we are going to check and monitoring the surface water, groundwater, if we see any contamination groundwater and find microorganisms, that's a sign of contamination. Do you have any data for water ground contaminations or any microorganisms? For example, if we are going to check underground water, underground water has no microorganisms. They are very clean. But if there is any contamination, like organic matter came from the soil going down to the groundwater, then the first thing you can see is microorganisms. They are struggling, trying to clean up. So do you see any microorganisms to sampling you took on groundwater?
Ryan, did you hear the question? Are you seeing any of that in what we've studied so far?
We've been, we sampling for all the components of concern. So as we do look at, so that is the part of the eco risk we'll be doing for some of the pig side. But but from a microorganisms, no, we are not looking for microorganisms. But we typically look for microorganisms as we start talking about remedial strategies historically. Then what is, then you're looking as part of the NAM process, then you are evaluating at that point as to what does that mean. So that will be part of, as we start looking at the CSM process, we will evaluate what are those groundwater conditions, what does that mean with respect to, you're looking at conductivity, the groundwater parameters that we collect. So you're looking at all of those parameters at that point, but not just microorganisms specifically.
Thanks, Narayan. Okay. Probably other time to continue on with the agenda. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Narayan.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Next steps reflection. That's what we have left. So next steps is we'll go through the internal agency process to finalize the report, and then the legislature, and then we'll see some public communication about the report. It will look like putting it on our website. We'll also we're looking for some community events would be easy to plug into and do more engagement on the work of the task force and the final report. So we haven't quite figured out what that part looks like yet. Some parts are certain. The final report will go on the webpage, and there may be more. We haven't quite planned that out yet. So yeah, with this, we're into the last step, which is the agency process to get it submitted to the legislature by February 15th. Any final reflections before I turn over to Pam to adjourn us?
Can you mention when turning it into the legislature, specific committee that it will be going to?
Yeah. Specific committee that I should carry around in my head, but I don't have it.
That's why I'm asking you. I don't have it.
That's a very important question. Yeah. We haven't got there yet. That's a late January, February question.
And how will we, as members of the task force, because this is going to take a couple of years, but I would hope that somehow we would still be kept informed, so that we know where, as far as the feasibility study, especially because that's really critical here. It's about the feasibility study, obviously, is how do you get it done? And making sure that you've got all the data, and maybe one thing will come out higher than the other, I don't know. But I would hope that we would still keep the task force informed as it moves forward, I guess, if that's possible, because we got it this far. And I'm really concerned, as I said before, about the studies that have been done in the past, and they seem to have some theme going forward, and then it doesn't happen. And I think part of that is the feasibility side of this. And because that's not been really done the way this seems like it's being done as far, and I wasn't part of the previous study, so I probably am speaking out of school here, but I just want to make sure that we actually have the steps, that the timeline is met, and that the legislature has something to really sink its teeth into as far as trying to get this cleaned up.
I think it would be a good thing to get feedback from you all on what is your level of involvement? How much of the details of the next step do you want to be involved in? What does that look like for you optimally? It'd be good to get feedback from on that.
As a neighbor, technically, we want to be very involved at the Met Council. Whatever that looks like, I don't know what feasibility studies look like with this, but we have many scientists and engineers that would have overlapping interests that would be available and interested in participating.
Okay, that's good.
As the legislative process goes, this task force was formed by the legislature at the request of stakeholders, probably at many levels and from many jurisdictions, perhaps even the center of the universe.
Yeah.
Which is nice to have on your side. And that will be interesting to see how that plays out with the interest from the legislature. Hopefully, as we're saying, there's some motivation, I suspect there will be, to push further into funding avenues.
This is presented to the legislature. It's going to, if it goes to a committee, I would hope that the task force members would be invited to attend that.
Our process internally for these sorts of submissions it is sent over by our legislative director to the committee chairs. And then if they invite us over for a hearing, that is certainly something that we can apprise everyone of. But out of the gate, I don't know that there would.
It just depends if there is something.
But yeah,
task force.
We can definitely do that.
Task force.
I can say, I don't know if feasibility studies what the typical process is in terms of public involvement, but if there is a, you know, listserv that folks sign up for updates, if there's that sort of thing, just making sure we all have the opportunity for that. So sort of at a minimum, we can be getting those public notice updates.
We've got an existing structure here that we could use and extend. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we have some other discussion about that. That would be a good platform to use.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, however, we can help in South St. Paul. Your point of being at a committee hearing or whatever is needed for that to lend support. I also offer our city council meetings, you know, if somebody wants to give a public address to our community across there, updates at any time, please do that. Our city, you guys have been to a couple things for on the road again and, you know, our Kaposia days. So those are always welcome for you to use as monitoring or updates for the community, public engagement across the river. And then if right now the Eagles are pretty active over there. So if there's anything right now that's happening, there's a lot of people who are out of town, but care about the river and are looking across the river at Pig's Eye and don't have any idea. So if any of that is of help to you, please let me know and I can help with our Parks and Rec staff or whatever, whomever you would need to help do any of that. So just want to be available for what, you know, as a former task force member.
Comments about involvement as we move to next steps.
One other thing, thanks to the public. I met some of you here and talked in depth, and so thank you for coming and being, you know, vocal for the public. It really is important. So thanks.
I think one of the comments from the public was about concern that Merca and Minera weren't in there, and I think they are. There is a paragraph on Merca and Minera in the plan. Yes.
All right, is it time to adjourn? I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. On behalf of Kirk and our commissioner's office, thank you. You have took a lot of time out of your schedule. You have really focused on this, provided a lot of good input, feedback, comments. Mirroring what Jimmy just said, thank you for being here, for sharing your thoughts and opinions, representing the public. It's greatly appreciated. We do plan to move this forward. We do plan to engage. Certainly when the slide was up there, it was like, we got to write Met Council on that slide too, being the neighbor. This won't be the last that you hear from us. We'll certainly be reaching out, and when there's opportunities to really collaborate and dig in, we'll certainly be reaching out as that's appropriate. But thank you sincerely. And Victoria, thank you for the goodies.
With that, we are adjourned.
Thanks.